Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Oh, okay, come on. Good morning. I just want to first thank Chainalysis and thank Kat Fairley and my good friend Terry Monahan, retired Chief of Department from the NYPD, for inviting me here today to speak to all of you. I just want to begin with a little bit of a history. And over my 40 years of law enforcement, I've seen criminals how they've innovated using technology to avoid law enforcement and being arrested. Maybe I'm showing my age a little bit, but back in the 80s and 90s, drug dealers started using beepers and payphones to sell their drugs. As we went into the late 90s, it was flip phones. Then it went into cell phones. Eventually, they used smartphones, and something that law enforcement still struggles with today is encrypted apps. The internet and the use of the dark web, creating online marketplaces like Silk Road. From selling contraband online to scams, money laundering, criminals always find a way to get one step in front of law enforcement. On the other side of that coin, the NYPD has a long history of pioneering new technologies in law enforcement to stay ahead of criminals. 1903, we started the first bomb squad in the United States. That was to combat the mafia and anarchists that were using bombs often. 1918 was the first time that we used aviation. 1930s and 40s, they put radios in cars, which made it easier for people to respond to calls for help. And then in 1960s, portable radios, so always trying to innovate. 1994, Commissioner Bratton started a program called CompStat, which is still used today. CompStat is a computer-generated analytical way of fighting crime. 2012, we created the Domain Awareness System, which is a system that integrated all our data along with cameras, license plate readers, ShotSpotter technology, and all of that became available to every police officer right on their smartphone. Each one of these innovations was created to catch up to the criminals. So what is the new technologies that criminals are using today to avoid law enforcement? And that's cryptocurrency. And although criminal element believes that by using crypto they can go undetected, technology has caught up to them. And again, we are getting in front of them with tools like Chainalysis. This report over here is the first mention of cryptocurrency that we have in NYPD. It was actually taken in 2014. It was filed in 2015. If you do read the report, there's a lot of typographical errors in it, so I guess that goes to show how smart our cops are. But besides that, the investigator had some real good points on this. You know, he basically explained it as a peer-to-peer network that uses blockchain technology. Or more importantly, it was that cryptocurrency, crypto undoubtedly was better regulated, and thanks to better regulations and restrictions, it is not something that can't be investigated. Bitcoin is no longer worth $234, it's worth $28,000 now. And while crypto still may be perhaps PayPal, companies like Chainalysis are helping law enforcement and regulators to peel back the layers. Conferences like this that share best practices are important to educate investigators with the current tools crimes that investigators can use to recover the illicit funds. But of course, the perps still they still do use crypto and fund their illegal activities. In 2022, estimates of cryptocurrency-based crime resulted in $20.6 billion being sent to illicit addresses. Cryptocurrencies have become more legitimate over the last decade, but the criminals are still relying on crypto to move their funds discreetly and anonymously as possible. The crimes that we see most that are used in crypto are scams targeting unassuming civilians, ransomware using crypto to pay for the keys for locking the computer, firearms and narcotics and child sex abuse materials in online marketplaces, terrorism finance, which we recently just did a big terrorism finance case. Unfortunately, we can't really get into it, but very, very much relied on Chainalysis for that case. And crypto ATMs are now common in New York City and undoubtedly provide convenience for law-abiding crypto users, but they also streamline the process in which criminals can rid themselves of hard cash. Good. As you can see from the headlines here, our federal partners have more than adequate ability to handle the high dollar amounts of cases. Federal agencies are probably the best at these crypto cases, but they cannot handle the volume of victims, scam victims, and the threshold for a federal case is a lot higher. So what happens to the citizens that are losing thousands of dollars in romance scams, utility scams? Who's investigating that? We need to expand our education of crypto to all members of your agency or our agency in the NYPD, not just the specialized units, but to everybody in the department. Responding officers need to know questions to ask the victims. Many of these crimes go incorrectly classified because the officers don't understand it. What are they looking at when they do a search warrant and they find a piece of paper with random words on it, seed phrase, or cold storage wallet? Cops at precincts and personnel need to be able to identify crypto assets they may encounter in day-to-day duties and make sure that they are routed to the proper investigators. Field guides, like this one that was provided by Chain Analysis, need to be provided to all patrol and detective squads. Just talking about partnerships. We created a couple of partnerships in the wake of 9/11. The SHIELD program, which is a private-public partnership, we use to educate the private sector on things that are going on in the city, about events that are happening in the city, and then a program like Sentry, where we partner with law enforcement from all around the country. Sentry has over 400 members of state and local partners. Their contacts allow investigators spanning numerous jurisdictions can be easily connected. And of course, we have our local partners across the 5 boroughs. Without that special, we'd like to just say a special thank you to especially the District Attorney of New York and the District Attorney's Office of Queens. Our international program is a unique Intelligence and Counterterrorism Bureau program like Sentry and SHIELD, established after 9/11 to foster the NYPD's awareness of global environment. However, this mission now has grown to transnational crimes and networks that often use crypto. These international partners, the question always comes up, how are we handling crypto cases? They are looking for innovative ways of dealing with crypto-enabled crimes, and oftentimes they look at us as role models. And while I am definitely not a crypto expert, my analyst, like Dan over here, is. And I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and he can get a little bit more into it.
Just a quick shout out here, this Chief and I up here, but there's a big team behind us. So quick shout out to Brian Custer, Dan Alessandrino, Tony Napoli, Mike Salema with the Nassau County Sheriffs. And a quick hand for Chief Galati here. He's retiring at the end of the month after 30 years, over 30 years in law enforcement. Thank you. So big thank you to him for coming up here and then presenting on this. So, after we're just talking about that, we're talking about all these small, the small dollar amount crimes, right? The small dollar amount cases. So where are we going from here? So a couple of headlines. These are all cases that were done by the NYPD or in cooperation with the NYPD's Financial Crimes Task Force, right? So the global Bitcoin money laundering operation, right, where an individual was knowingly facilitating hard currency to crypto and vice versa for drug traffickers and other, squatters and scammers, right? We were able to get that at a local level and prosecute it, right? The dark web vendor with the illegal narcotics, that was the Eastern District of New York case. This is an individual that was operating a door-to-door DoorDash style delivery service for drugs, which if you watch the news in New York City has been responsible for a huge uptick in the amount of deaths for people that are using drugs that are laced with fentanyl and other illicit or dangerous substances. And then finally, we have, this was a case I believe was done by Tony Napoli, but the idea of $1.3 million in cryptocurrency assets that were used by scammers, right? So to give you a breakdown from the press release, that's $300K that went to Turkey, about $700,000 that went to Nigeria, and about another $700,000 that were deposited into Bitcoin ATMs in New York City, right? People that were getting innocently scammed out of their hard-earned funds. Danny and the NYPD were able to freeze that and seize those currencies. But that was in 10 months, right? So if that's over 1.3 million in 10 months, where are we going from here? And that's what this next slide is also about. This is some press releases from the drug busts. These are all cases that were done by their respective DA's offices, right? So by the Queens DA and by the Manhattan DA. These were unilaterally done by those offices, not by the NYPD, but it gives you an idea of the diversity of the cryptocurrency-enabled crime landscape in New York City. So for every one of these cases, there's probably about 5 that don't make the headlines. So if that's the kind of volume that we're seeing here in the city, what's that going to look like as crypto becomes a more mainstream, diversified way for people to transport funds from fiat currency to crypto and vice versa. And that's why it's really important. If you were at one of the pieces yesterday, Greg Roche and the Chainalysis team, they rolled out the field investigations tool, which is going to be a huge up in being able to get that one piece of information that an investigator finds at a crime scene and getting it to the hands of someone that can actually take that and identify whether or not it's important and catalog that for future use in investigations. Going from there, and we're in the crossroads of the world right now in Times Square. I think it's important to highlight that New York City is this global city that, as much as you think, yeah, it's a municipal police department, it's important to realize that the NYPD does have reach outside of New York City. So in Queens, when a irate former student paid a swatter based in Poland $80 in US currency, but via Bitcoin, to swat his former high school, it turned into almost a year's worth of trauma, metal detectors, bomb scares for the students at the school, right? But the idea being that someone can make an impact from half a world away on people in New York City. But thanks to the NYPD and the Queens DA's office, they were able to use Chainalysis and other investigative means to track down and locate not only the perp in Poland, but also the individual who paid him here in New York. And they were able to make a successful arrest in that case. And then finally here, as the chief alluded to, just quickly mentioning it, 9/11 was over 20 years ago, but the NYPD has a special focus on counterterrorism, to never forget that day and to follow up on dangers to New York City. So back in the fall, in October, working between the NYPD Intelligence Bureau and the Manhattan DA's office, we were able to bring the first state-level terrorism financing case that, as the chief mentioned too, we would love to have talked about, but it's currently in adjudication. And it just goes to show it's about $15,000 allegedly that was sent to these groups, but it's not just the money too. It's about looking at the further criminality there and about what could have happened had we not used tools to get in there and take a look at what kind of financial activity was going on. So I know it's the crossroads of the world. It's a big city, but it has global impact, both here and across the world. So thank you very much for hearing us out, and enjoy lunch.